So, I hope that we could resolve the technical problems. Sorry for that. We are now coming to the last block of this morning's program, which is called Talk with Young Scientists. And we have representatives of two bodies. One is called the Swiss Study Foundation. Those are to the right-hand side of mine. And the other is Youth Encounter Sustainability. And I think what's the essence of about, they're young people who are talented and very motivated to take social responsibility. And they will be our future leaders, probably. And so talking with young scientists, it's hearing her voice. This is what I would like to do now in the next half hour that we have. And I will now just make a first round. Ask the participants to introduce themselves so that you know a little bit about her background. Let's start on the left-hand side.
Yes, thank you. Instead of starting with ladies first, this is men's first in this round.
Yeah.
My name is Timo von Wirth. I am from Germany and I hold a master's degree in economics and geography. And I will start my PhD quite soon. In sustainability and system analysis, and I mainly was affiliated with projects in environmental planning and urban planning. And as you already mentioned, I am representing the group of YES, Youth Encounter and Sustainability, which is at the moment organized and directed by Roger Beau and the Actis Foundation based in Zurich.
Okay. Then we have a guest from Colombia.
My name is Dana Guzman. I am from Colombia in South America. I'm also a member of the Youth Encounter of Sustainability. I hold a Bachelor in Government and International Affairs from Externado de Colombia University in Bogotá, Colombia, and also graduate studies in International Business and Trade in a joint program with Columbia University in New York and Externado de Colombia University in my home country. And my professional activities have been guided in terms of fair trade and international cooperation with developing countries. And currently I am based in Zurich, Switzerland.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the right-hand side, please, if you would like to start.
I'm Selina Launer. I study art education and art history in Bern. So I'm more from the artistic side, not a scientist. And I'm interested in decision making as well as politics, and I did my master project. It was an artistic project on decision making with the question that we have more and more decisions to make. There are more and more options. We have more and more individuality, and I was questioning people about that. I made an installation that was also participative, so I'm interested in that kind of things.
Yeah, please.
My name is Anna Zuber. I have a philosophical background. I studied political and economic philosophy and international law at the University of Bern, and I'm currently pursuing a PhD project also in political philosophy at the University of Zurich, and it's about ethics of speculation with a special focus on commodity markets. So for instance, food security is a big issue here, but always, of course, from a normative perspective.
Okay, this was the introductory round. Now, I think this morning we had the topic freedom of choice. And if I ask all of you, what were the most important things that you observed that you would like to discuss? Who would like to start? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as a philosopher, I think I'm always supposed to ask the big question. Of course, what I would be most interested in is really the big question, why should we care about freedom at all? But I know that's much too big to debate here. So the next question then would be, why do we care about freedom of choice as one specific form of freedom, for instance, as opposed to freedom from coercion? And there I have an idea I mean, what the basic value behind could be. For instance, it could be more in the direction of autonomy, or it could more go in the direction of welfare. And this is still quite abstract, I guess. So the question I would like to discuss, and which was raised at some points also that morning, is the question about the adequacy of paternalism in politics. And I think that question is related to what I just explained about the two different conceptions of what is, or ideas about what is important of freedom of choice. Because if you, well, your answer will be different if you have an idea of autonomy in mind, or if you have more the idea of welfare in mind. And I would like to discuss with you and maybe the public what you think. I mean, the term to fix the voters has also already a very paternalistic sound for me. So, yeah.
So if I understood you correctly, it's about the ultimate goal, what we are looking for. Okay, let's come back later. Who would like to continue? Back to you. What is your main thing that you took up?
My main question is a bit like about the last speech, and it was a lot whether the media has a big effect or not, but it was not really discussed what arguments people are really making their decisions upon. I mean, in Switzerland we have this little booklet before the votings, and where they describe the pros and cons of some initiatives, and probably it's still the most important source where people are taking the information out. But we also have a lot of discussions that are absolutely not objective before the votings, and so for me it's interesting whether all those non-objective discussions really have an impact, even though they have a big space in media, or whether they don't.
Okay, so let's move to you. Yeah.
Well, actually, I have a very, first of all, pragmatic approach regarding the speeches from this morning, which actually I found very, very interesting and appealing. So first of all, thanks to the three speakers. I fully agree that having a choice of freedom is absolutely the basis of freedom and democracy, first of all. And therefore, we need, of course, informed and competent citizens, and either through persuasion or media. And however, we learned that a competent citizen still have a bounded rationality. I mean, we know about heuristics, and so in a pragmatic way, I asked myself what beside informed and competent citizens would be needed, and especially the situation in Germany. I was thinking about an example. I maybe can tell you later a little bit more on. It's the rebuilding of the train station in Stuttgart 21, which is a really interesting, also democratic and political process. So, and from my perspective, and there I refer to Professor van der Dele, we need the adequate choice procedures that give the people a clear feeling of being trusted in their abilities to decide, and of integrating their voices. That's one point. And the second one is we need the leaders that also trust in the abilities and competencies of the citizens. And so certainly there are different scales of decisions that cannot be done directly, but I mean, these are the 2 points I really wanted to point out.
Okay, let's go to you.
Yeah. Hello. Yes. in a way to complement the vision of Timo, I would like to set a statement. Having freedom and choice does not mean that we are all free to do what we want. We all operate under certain constraints, under regulations, being by laws or economic policies, as well as constraints that are measured by responsibilities which are taking place under human morality and ethics. And these constraints are essential and valuable, and we will not have the freedoms that we have if we do not operate under the rule of law. This may seem a little paradoxical, but it is not, I believe. These constraints define our structure and order, and in defining certain legal boundaries, they free us to pursue what is not prohibited and is not mandated. Why do I mention this? I come from Colombia. Colombia, it's a constitutional democracy. The Constitution is giving freedom of information, freedom of choice, freedom of beliefs, of press, of speech, and they all are guaranteed by the Constitution. But they are factually limited because the state has failed to provide the rule of law. And I believe that in this specific setting, which is a different setting than the one that you find in European countries, this is a main concern and an obstacle to move towards a free society.
Okay, so trying to sum up, I think we have three clusters of questions now that were brought up. The first one is about, let me say that, rules of the game. What we are really looking for: autonomy, welfare, constraints. And then we have this issue of capacity building of citizens, and finally the mechanism. How to aggregate individual preferences on several issues. Maybe we could start on this, I call that rules of the game. What were you looking for? Autonomy or welfare, and how does those two things constrain the freedom of choice? This is probably one question to start with. Would you brought up this issue, like to comment on that, that we can understand a little bit better what?
Well, maybe I would more like to react to your statement. Or at least as I understood it, or what I find interesting in it. We heard a lot about information and how to do good information, about informed citizens in these lectures this morning. And I think what you mentioned is that there is the second aspect, and this is the aspect like freedom from coercion more. So if you have to decide about an issue, you always have these two aspects. So the first aspect is it's you who are deciding, and the second aspect is on what are you deciding. And then it can be the case that you are completely sure what you want, but you're mistaken about the facts, about what you are deciding on. And that's a problem, I think, that was mostly focused this morning on. Like, what are the relevant information to really guarantee a good decision? And I would like to add here that I don't think it's only information, but it's also values, because I don't think that our values are just so transparent to ourselves, so that we don't have to think or reflect about our values in order to know what we want, but that's just in brackets. And then there's the second point, which is probably not so important in countries like Switzerland, but it's the reason why we send election observers. It's that you can be coerced to give a different vote than you would like to, for instance. So you're not free to express your true opinion. And then what I found very interesting, if I got this right, in the first, I don't know which lecture it was, there was the idea that even if both of these aspects were secured, there still could be a problem about choices. And this is because the range of choices, or what we are deciding on, is limited. And if the set consists only of bad choices, then you can be fully informed and you can make your rational choice, but the choice still can turn out very bad. Or, for instance, I was working in my master's thesis on exploitation, and one example was about organ donation in Asia. And there was this woman who was very poor and considered donating a kidney to get money. And the fact was, the range of her options was probably, I don't know, some sweatshop labor, maybe prostitution, or organ donation, or starvation, of course, is an option too. And she, in the interview, she said, well, of course, I would do it again. It was the right choice to do. But what options did I have? So she clearly did not feel free in her choices, although I think the first two criteria would be fulfilled. So I would like maybe to discuss a little bit more what is there more to a good choice? What is the quality of options, the quantity of options? I don't know.
So about the quality of choice, how to formulate choices. Who would like to react on that?
Well, then I come back to the first speaker this morning. I don't know if there will be a consensus on the quality of moral choices, because it's based on individual values. And so we have heard that there can be a rational dissent, and as mentioned before, within a world of bounded rationality, I don't see the point that we come to a kind of definition, as you asked, about what is a moral, clear, or consistent decision or choice.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it's really a problem of our system that normally we just have questions with two options. I mean, there's just option 1 and option 2, and normally those options have many. I mean, if it's just one question and you can say yes or no, but normally it's like you keep this has, there's this and this and this within, but if I take the other option, I have that and that and that within, but perhaps you want to have something that is between, but as you're not a parliamentary, you can just say yes or no, and if there's no choice you like, perhaps you just don't say anything. I mean, I think that's a difficulty. Do you
have an alternative how to do that, or to improve? Any other?
Yeah, I mean, here we are at the point of the mechanisms, actually, because take a pragmatic example of a mediation process, or as we heard about deliberation processes. There are chances of diverse choice options that can come up in a process of discussing, communicating, hearing each other, having face-to-face contact, building up trust, and as we heard, long-time relationships. This, for me, is one way to maybe solve this problem.
So you propose a kind of new mechanisms to come up with choices, options of choices.
Yeah, going back to the example I mentioned in the beginning, this situation with the Stuttgart main station is quickly the following. It is a huge infrastructure project, and the whole planning process and the decision-making process went over 17 years. And you have the whole range of choices that people can state to the representatives, and you had in between a lot of elections where the leaders actually stated a yes for the project, and the citizens voted them. And now finally people are on the street, and there seems to be a moral dissent now regarding the project. And there are other projects, like the extension of the Vienna airport, where in a very, very early stage of the process, of the decision-making process, all stakeholders have been included in a negotiation process. And even the parties that were completely opposing opponents of extending the airport due to environmental issues, noise issues, they signed the mediation agreement in the end. And it was actually another option then. It was not only a dichotomous choice then, because it was an extension, but a smaller one in form of a compromise. Even a consensus was found then.
Okay. Any other comments to this issue of how to frame choices or binary choices? Would you like to add something?
I would like to add something related, but also perhaps enhancing the point. We witness, or we have realized that in current political scenarios faced by democracies all over the world, participants tend to have completely extreme moral views. And it seems that they look to defeat the other. Parts of the society, which are not sharing equal moral values, seem not to be interested in making the opposites being part of the democratic deliberating process. And on the other side, other parts of the society, despite being invited to be part of the deliberation process, are not willing to participate. So the question that I raise is, due to the fact that moral values among participating agents create outrage, limiting the reach of consensus, then what can be done when parties are not willing to participate? Do minorities not willing to participate and whom are boycotting this consensus process due to moral differences, can they be brought by the majority to participate, but shall they be forced? That's...
Okay. Anybody would like to comment? I think it was the issue that we heard in our second address. And there we heard that if you really use the traditional way, it will end up in some kind of a war of value systems, and how to come up with a new proposal. Who would like to comment on that? Would you like, maybe we can even ask the speaker. Would you like to comment on that again? Professor van den Dele?
Yeah, in a way it's difficult not to participate if you are invited for participation, especially if you are a protest movement. You normally ask for participation. And the worst thing that can happen to the protest movement is that you are really invited to participate, because then all these kind of accommodation processes begin. The best thing for the protest movement is if participation is denied. Then you can cry out for violation of formal justice. Yeah? And everybody will agree, it's a violation of formal justice. So, within the participation, of course, then all these processes come up, and you may come up with a consensus decision, but that is a consensus decision of all those who have been involved. Then you have the normal principal-agent problem. I mean, many of the agents in the participation, they will not be willing to acknowledge the result because they get ostracized when they come home, because they have compromised in the deliberation. So we have all this problem, and sometimes the groups decide not to participate. But it's very difficult in a liberal society, and therefore I think you should invite participation. And any movement where you say, you shouldn't talk with these fundamentalists, it's a very bad movement. We have this boycotting in the Islam conference of Miri Görlic. Yeah? That was a big, big mistake. Yeah? I mean, you should not invite terrorists immediately after making a terrorist attack. But you should invite potential terrorists for the dialogue, because that will possibly change them.
Okay. Did this statement clear? Yes. Okay. Any other comments on this issue?
I would rather like to do another comment on the first thing Anna was telling, that there's a question whether we put welfare higher or just, as I understood, the fact that you really have the free choice as an individual. And I think that's really a bit of a problem in Swiss democracy at the moment. I mean, you cannot blame the right side to say, okay, it's more important that we can make the decision, even though if we make laws against the European right, because they say their value is the individual decision of the demos is a higher value than the welfare or the European law, and others say it's important that the people need to do decisions that are important for the welfare of all of them. I mean, as I understood, that was more or less what you said. Or did I misunderstood you? Totally.
I don't think that I took any specific position on it.
No.
And I'm not sure if it's really welfare. If welfare would be really the right idea if you're talking about international law in this context, if this is really a welfare question, or if that's something different then. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, just a comment on welfare. Welfare, I think, is a quite traditional concept. Maybe we should go beyond that, because welfare, how we handle that, it's only summing up the individual choices. And if you look all those the figures that we are measuring welfare, like the gross national product, for example, the richest part of a community can improve a lot, where the poorest part can lose, and welfare is still increasing. And if I go back, for example, to John Rawls' theory of justice, he, if I understand that correctly, he really addressed this point, that we should look differently how to move beyond the concept of welfare. That's at least my point of view, that this is one thing on the agenda of sustainable development. Would you like to comment on or ask a question?
I agree.
You agree?
Yeah.
You agree? So are
maybe one sentence. He proposes this thought experiment so that people should have to decide upon the rules without knowing what position they will have later in that community or in that society. And he claims that people would agree on a list of basic rights or liberties which are guaranteed for everybody, and that, yeah, okay, I'll leave that. And that welfare considerations cannot be used to limit individual liberties of those of everybody. And yeah, that's what you were talking about. So that welfare is only at second place. First are the individual rights.
Okay. Now, if I look, we will have another 5 minutes, and maybe I just suggest that we now focus a little bit on the outlook. If you have some wishes how democracy would look like in the future, or the freedom of choice, what were the wishes that you would give to the politicians, and maybe what you think that you could contribute to improve the process at this policy science interface or the policy citizens interface? I think that's really the thing that in this conference, this interface plays a crucial role. Some ideas already?
Well, I can start. Well, briefly, of course, we need a legitimate choice framework for the society. But I come back to the point I stated in the beginning. For me, it's definitely also a question of leadership and what kind of role models we see that kind of open up a path for future choices. So, and I asked today's leaders to show more trusteeship, truthfulness, openness. I mean, they are the ones that represent, hopefully, a transparent, representative society and a democracy. So these are, I'm talking about values, but I want to see them in their everyday political life and in the decision processes they are leading or accompanying for certain groups in a society.
So your point is that some type of policy entrepreneurs who really take political leadership, or
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay. Other, what's your?
I believe that many decisions taken in democratic systems are affected by elements relying in civic education. Democratic systems have failed to prevent the demos, the people, to make the decisions leading to increase their quality of life, partly due to the non-proper formation or creation of worthy citizens. And we have to discuss what is a worthy citizen. And I guess this is also taking place under the absence of proper civic education, or civic or democratic education. I believe civic education should not only be regards to teaching about the virtues and competences needed to select our representatives wisely, but also how to relate to them in an appropriate way and to evaluate the performance in office in an accurate way.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to continue?
Yeah, I also think that our society gets more and more complicated, and so I think what the first speech was on is very, very important, that especially scientists, but also politicians, get more aware to describe the things in a way that people can understand them. I mean, it's difficult, but I think there can still be a lot done here.
Okay, no problem.
Well, what concerns the politicians, of course, I would like to have more virtuous politicians, but I'm quite skeptical about that. So I rather would go for making the rules in a way that even if they have bad intentions or are not like the saints we would like to have, then things will not turn out too badly. So, and if power relations are changing, for example, if the media power is growing, then I think we have to think about how to make new rules or how to frame the whole process in a way to balance the powers, that none of them is too strong in the end. And this is also about lobbying, of course, about lobbying powers. And what concerns science, or yeah, for me, I claim guilty as a philosopher that we are not enough concerned usually about the real world, because we are usually no empirical science, and I'm not quite sure what to think about. I think that it's no bad idea to have a task division. That there are some people who are reflecting on really what would be the right thing to do, even if it's not feasible, not today, maybe not at all. and that it's important to reflect on basic questions and values, but there has to be some spillover or some transformation also. It cannot be that it's completely disconnected to the real world. I don't know exactly how this should work, but we should more talk to each other and make the positions clear in order to avoid misunderstandings, but still try to find a way to connect the two spheres.
Okay, if I look, I think we are already at the end and everybody's waiting for a lunch break. So thank you very much. Just let me briefly try to sum up what we heard this morning. I think one assumption that I mentioned is to have enough information to make good decisions. And I learned this morning that there is no need to have full information. It's just enough sufficient information, and there that we have a problem at the science policy and the science citizens interface, and that this is mainly a problem of the science community. I think this was coming out very clearly, that we have to improve the way how we can build capacities within our citizens. Then a second point was very important, is about procedures for conflict resolution. And those procedures themselves, it's not enough. We need what you brought in, I think, some leadership. People who know how to lead those processes, how to handle this. And I'm quite confident that the generation of you will make a contribution to that, and it's always interesting to see really interested and motivated people like you contributing, not only within science but also within society as a whole. I would like to close the session, and now we have lunch break, so thank you very much for attending and for contributing, and mainly you for your excellent contribution. Thanks a lot.